pancreatitis complications. I would like to invite the moderator and the chairpersons for this session, Dr. Soumya J. Mahapatra, Associate Professor, AIIMS, Delhi, Dr. Pratap Molly Venigala, Senior Consultant, KIMS, Guntur.
Good morning, everyone. We are going to begin our next session, acute pancreatitis complication. And for this session, it would be my pleasure to invite Professor Vinila Chacko, who is Professor and Head of Division of Critical Care, Christian Medical College, Vellore. She would be delivering her talk on managing intra-abdominal hypertension in acute pancreatitis.
Good morning, and thank you to the chairpersons and Dr. Sudipto and his team for giving me this opportunity to share a very practical approach to intra-abdominal pressure. So I'm an intensive care physician, and so this talk is going to be very different from the previous talks, but my talk has been made a lot easier because of all the talks that have happened before. So a lot of aspects which I'll be covering have already been covered. So I don't have any particular disclosures to make. I think Dr. Soumya will be able to recognize the person on the screen. That is one of our junior consultants. And so essentially, my talk is going to take you away from theory, and we're going to delve straight into the ward and the ICU and how we actually monitor and manage intra-abdominal hypertension. So this is a case scenario of a 38-year-old obese man who's in the ward. He has no comorbidities, and he's been admitted with a 1-week history of alcohol-induced pancreatitis. He has severe epigastric pain and abdominal distension. He was tachycardic at 120, blood pressure 104/60, and his saturation was 94% on room air. This was his ABG, which was done in the ward, 7.35 pH, CO2 of 40, bicarb of 22, PO2 of 55, and a lactate of 1.2, and a serum creatinine of 1.3 milligrams per deciliter. So as I said, this is going to be a very, more questions and case-based. So do I need to worry about intra-abdominal hypertension in this patient? This is a patient who is in the ward, not yet reached my ICU. These are the investigations that have been put up in the earlier slide as well. I think in my mind, whenever I have a patient like this, there are two questions which I ask. Does he have organ dysfunction? And this is a very popular scoring system which is linked to pancreatitis. We have other scoring systems in ICU as well, like the SOFA score. And so the modified Marshall scoring system for this patient works out to be 2 because of the drop in his PF ratio, which lies in the range of 201 to 300. But I also want to alert one thing. When we see an ABG like this, where the pH is 7.35, that itself, in my mind, is like a red, it's a red flag, because it tells me my patient is just about, edging on to respiratory acidosis, and it's something which I need to watch out for. The second thing which I ask is, does he have risk factors? And in this patient, in addition to him having acute pancreatitis, which we all know is linked to intra-abdominal hypertension, he's also obese, which adds another additional component. So in this gentleman, should I worry about intra-abdominal hypertension? Yes, I should, and I should be on high alert. In addition, if we look at the data that we have, acute pancreatitis per se, I would say 1 in 3 to 1 in 4 patients of acute pancreatitis could have intra-abdominal hypertension, more so in severe acute pancreatitis, where the incidence is much higher, where the incidence is about 60 to 80%. So the next question which I have is, should I monitor IAP for all my patients with acute pancreatitis, given that the incidence is fairly high? According to the recent guidelines published in 2025, which I'm sure all of you are aware of, it's been recommended as a good practice statement to measure intra-abdominal pressure in patients with severe acute pancreatitis. Okay? If IAP is more than 12, then IAP should be monitored periodically in patients with severe acute pancreatitis. So the practical implications in this patient. This patient, by definition, is a moderately severe pancreatitis. He does have risk factors. He has organ dysfunction by the modified Marshall score. Should we do surveillance for early pickup? I just want a show of hands from the audience would you actually monitor IAP in this patient? Just a show of hands, just to make it a little interactive. Okay, so I see a few hands actually going up. And this is an analogy with the paradigm. So if you don't take a temperature, you can't find a fever. Similarly, in this year, I think the question we should be asking is, if you don't check IAP, you won't find intra-abdominal hypertension. So are we just not picking it up early? The second question, the third question which I want to ask is, this gentleman is in your ward. He's spontaneously breathing. Can I measure IOP for this patient? Can you measure? Yes, no, yes? How many for yes? No hands going up. I don't know whether it means everyone says no. Well, IAP monitoring has been validated mostly in mechanically ventilated patients. In spontaneous breathing, there are very few studies. Ideally, if your patient is pain-free, optimally, I would say pain control or sedated, you can actually monitor IAP even in your patients in the ward. Now, this is the traditional kind of monitoring system, which I'm sure all of you are aware of. You need to have a catheter, 3 stopcocks, and you have a manometer in place. The drawback is this is fairly labor intensive. I know whenever I had to check CSF pressures, pulling that manometer was not something which was my favorite thing to do. And so getting the manometer out can be cumbersome. Additionally, this is a very intermittent measurement, not a continuous measurement. And this additionally could result in a delayed diagnosis of intra-abdominal hypertension. So a few points to note. If you are measuring for the trainees, if you are measuring IAP in the ward, make sure your patient is supine. The pressure transducer should be zeroed at the mid-axillary level, at the level of the iliac crest. Instill 25 ml of normal saline. And I just want to, I know you can see it here in this little picture here. This is Malbrain is a guy who's done a lot of work in measuring techniques, IAP measuring techniques, and the amount of fluid. So it's very interesting how, they found out that 25 ml of saline, the bladder pressure doesn't change as much as compared to nothing. Whereas the moment you increase it to 50 or 100 ml, the IAP can be falsely elevated. So 25 ml is the recommended fluid that needs to be instilled in the bladder. And you should measure the IAP, it is measured in centimeters of water when you're using a manometer. That needs to be converted to millimeters of mercury, and it should be done at end expiration. In stable patients, the recommendation is you do the IAP measurement every 12 hours. In patients who have severe acute pancreatitis and organ dysfunction more frequently. So, like in ICU, I know since I work in an ICU, we're very used to having monitors and continuous arterial monitoring systems. So is there a role for continuous intra-abdominal pressure monitoring, to pick it up early for surveillance? And there are studies which have come out very recently. These are more validation studies to see whether the IAP, which is measured by this continuous tool, matches the IAP which is measured by a traditional Foley's catheter method. And so in this is a trauma guard catheter, and this study actually showed that the values of IAP correlated quite well in patients who were supine and in reverse Trendelenburg position. So it correlated quite well, continuous IAP monitoring with IAP measured by the traditional method. This is another interesting tool which has come up, which is called the MC sensor, or the muscle contraction sensor, that has also come out this year. But this has been studied mainly in the operative setting and not in spontaneously breathing or patients who have, who may have pain or active contractions. But I'm sure this will also be investigated with time, and that can give you a continuous IAP monitoring, which has been shown to have excellent correlation with the traditional method. So the next question is, IAP has come as 14, should I worry? The most important thing to remember is, I think it's important to take repeated measurement. Intra-abdominal hypertension has been defined as the sustained or repeated pathological elevation of IAP more than 12. And these are the grades of intra-abdominal hypertension, which I'm sure all of you are aware of, based on from grade 1 to grade 4. And there should be 2 measurements taken, probably 6 hours apart. Abdominal compartment syndrome is an all or none phenomena. You have a sustained IAP more than 20, with or without abdominal perfusion pressure less than 60, which is the MAP minus the intra-abdominal pressure, that is associated with new organ dysfunction or failure. I should have kept this a little later, but suppose my patient is anuric and or oligoanuric, Dr. Vinoy is here. Can I still measure IAP using bladder measurement? You can, because you just have to instill your 25 ml of saline in the bladder, and you can take it. So it's not that, but you need to have a catheter. That's the most important thing. What if I can't measure intra-bladder pressures in situations like neurogenic bladder, BPH? Does clinical examination help? Does it help? It's actually, people have looked at the sensitivity, specificity of clinical examination in picking up intra-abdominal hypertension. The sensitivity specificity is actually very low. Additionally, people, the thought process for many intensivists is when they develop organ failure, it could suggest that the patient is having intra-abdominal hypertension, but that also tends to pick it up a lot later. So these are tools which are fairly low sensitivity and specificity. This is something interesting if at all a CT scan is done. If it shows an increased anteroposterior to transverse diameter more than 0.8 at the level of the renal vein, this is known as the round belly sign. This could give you a clue that the patient has intra-abdominal hypertension. It's not diagnostic, but it could give you a clue. Now, intra-abdominal hypertension in acute pancreatitis this is all, I think, this textbook knowledge, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, but broadly, increased intraluminal contents, increased extraluminal contents, decreased abdominal wall compliance. And this I'm talking to specifically with regards to acute pancreatitis. If you have an ileus or bowel edema, ascites, third spacing, aggressive fluid resuscitation. The next point about peripancreatic inflammation and fat necrosis, in my mind, I feel it is whether that is causing the intra-abdominal hypertension or whether it's more an association rather than a causation. In my mind, I think it's more association, but they have actually found more peripancreatic inflammation and fat necrosis in patients with raised intra-abdominal pressures. This has been covered in previous talks as well. Why do you need to worry if IAP is high? I think the most important thing is organ crosstalk. This is what we are seeing more and more in intensive care. One organ gets damaged, many other organs get damaged. You have damage to the kidneys, to the lungs, to the intestines, the brain as well. So there are many organs which can get damaged because of raised intra-abdominal pressures. And repeatedly, as I said, this in terms of outcomes, more organ failure, longer ICU stay, more invasive treatment, more mortality. So this is something which is extremely important, and we need to know the core principles of management. In terms of management, again, as I said, I'm going to deal with it in a very practical way as to what we actually do in the ICU. So if I have an IAP which is more than 12, my main goal is the first 3 points in ABC, which is improving my abdominal wall compliance. Analgesia has been covered very, extensively in a previous talk, and I just want to give you a few insights as to what we do. So we tend to use fentanyl as an infusion once they come to ICU, but we have actually started using a bit of epidural analgesia, and we found that it decreases the requirement of fentanyl. In terms of neuromuscular blockade, it's something which we use very, very rarely, only if the IAP is very high despite our sedation and analgesia. Putting in an NG tube is something which we would do. About prokinetics, I'll tell you in a little while. What we generally try to do is we tend to start a bit of trophic feeding on day 1 to day 2, because I think stimulating the bowel to move can also help in, especially in patients who do not have abdominal compartment syndrome. You can stimulate the bowel and ensure some bowel movement. And about optimizing fluid resuscitation. So this is the improving abdominal wall compliance in terms of patient positioning. Reverse Trendelenburg is something which is very, very interesting. So if you look at this, you can see here that the pressures in reverse Trendelenburg positions are much lower at 15 degrees. Is much lower, IAP pressures are much lower as compared to someone who's head-end elevation. For an intensivist, our standard dictum for decreasing ventilator-associated pneumonia is head-end elevation at 30 to 45 degrees. So in pancreatitis, this is something different, where I have to put the patient at reverse Trendelenburg 15 degrees. These are studies, again, which are well known to all of you. This is the neostigmine study published in 2022. It's a small study which found that neostigmine actually decreased the IAP, but larger trials are warranted. And this is the famous waterfall trial, which again was discussed earlier, aggressive versus moderate fluid resuscitation, where they targeted a sample size of 744. But however, the study was stopped early because of worse outcomes in the aggressive group. So essentially in ICU, what we would do would be to go for the moderate approach. We would only give fluids if they were hypovolemic or third spacing, and continue our regular normal dosing of fluids. Diuretics and dialysis will be, I think there's not much evidence on it, and Dr. Vinoy will be talking about it, so I won't spend too much time on that. If the IAP continues to be elevated despite these approaches, options are, number one would be, to percutaneous drain of these ascites with a percutaneous catheter. That is very easy to do, and that can be considered if the IAP is not improving with standard techniques or if there is evidence of organ failure. About percutaneous drainage of necrotic collections, the timing is unclear, and they're very small studies which have shown that it does decrease IAP, which you can see here. You can see that percutaneous pigtail catheter drainage of necrosis decreases IAP, and there's actually one study which actually showed that reduction of IAP with the pigtail catheter by more than 40% was associated with better survival. Surgical decompression, I think it's, I can see Dr. Sudipta is shaking his head vigorously, negatively, I presume. It's indicated if abdominal compartment syndrome persists despite medical drainage and percutaneous drainage, but there are a lot of limitations, and so this is a topic for debate. I don't know whether there are debates in this conference, but in terms of should we do, should we not do, are we too late when we're considering it, because the mortality rates have been reported to be fairly high despite decompression. And the important thing is IAP also has not been found to decline significantly post-decompression. The risk of reperfusion syndrome is also very high with hemorrhage and worse outcomes. So really, should we consider surgery at all? I think the families, if at all we are pushed against the wall, families should understand the risks and the complication and the lack of significant benefit with surgical decompression. Coming to the last part of my talk, which is about a patient has come to ICU. He's been intubated and ventilated. He's got severe ARDS. And IAP is 18 to 20 millimeters of mercury. One of the standard techniques which we follow when you have a patient with severe ARDS is proning. So again, just a show of hands, how many would prone this patient? I have one hand up, a couple of hands, 3, 4 hands up. Okay, so the usual worry or concern is that IAP will go up when you prone the patient. But this is a technique which we follow for proning patients with intra-abdominal hypertension, where you're putting bolsters beneath the chest and beneath the pubic symphysis that kind of keeps the abdomen lax and decreases the compliance, improves the compliance of the abdominal wall. And that actually helps in better ventilation of the lungs. So there are several gaps in which we still need to address. I think surveillance is very, very important. We still need to have some more answers as to tools which can pick up IAP earlier. Should we do continuous monitoring? A lot of studies still need to be done in terms of medical therapies, bigger studies in terms of the role of prokinetics. Timing and drainage, timing of drainage and surgery, indications of drainage and surgery, this needs to be better defined is what I would say. This is a repeated point. So just some take-home points is intra-abdominal hypertension is definitely very prevalent in patients with severe acute pancreatitis, and the goal should be to not wait for organ failure to set in, but to monitor IAP early. As of now, we have bladder is the best for measuring intra-abdominal pressure. In terms of fluids, my take is less is more. Avoid aggressive resuscitation. Decompress stepwise in terms of emptying the bowel. Improving the abdominal wall compliance, and drain collections if there is no improvement despite these measures, and surgery as a last resort reserved for refractory ACS. And I think the goal should be, as clinicians should be to try and pick up intra-abdominal hypertension early and to look at preventive strategies. Thank you.